All right, Kevin back with you for another episode of the Million Dollar Relationships Podcast. And today I'm here with my friend Blake Eastman. Blake, welcome to the podcast, man.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. I'll tell you, this is very interesting. So you and I have known each other for all of about a month right now.
Yeah.
And you and I were both invited by Tim and Fam to this thing called Skyline Dinner Party that they host at their place in Austin. And I was going down there for a trip last month, and I talked with Tim probably 2 months prior to that, and he's like, "Hey, we're going to be hosting one of these dinner parties while you're down here. Would you like to come?" And I'm like, "Sure." And what an awesome experience that was. I've known Tim for a couple of years. I got connected to Tim through a mutual friend of ours. Eric is the one that originally connected me to Tim. And then I had taken a trip to Austin probably about a year and a half ago. And Tim and I got together in person, just went and had lunch for one day and stuff, and then invited me to his dinner party last month. And what an amazing group of people that was. And you and I got to have a conversation as we were kind of ending, and even we walked outside together that evening, and just we're getting into and I ain't gonna lie, Blake, I'm just completely fascinated by the work you do. I'm also like, dang, how deep does this guy get into somebody's head really fast? and so I'm like, man, I really would love to interview you for the podcast, and here we are. And so what I'll do is I will start by just turning it over to you to share a little bit of what you do, who you serve, what inspires you most about the work you do. We'll just start there, Blake.
Okay. So yeah, my name is Blake. I own a company called the Nonverbal Group, which is a behavioral research and education company that really focuses on the more nuanced aspects of people skills. So reading human behavior, controlling your own behavior, understanding others. And we take a really focused approach. We use video as our mechanism for doing that, and specifically behavior. So I'm known for the largest behavioral study ever conducted on poker players. I helped the world's best poker players read the behavior of other poker players.
Wow.
I did that for many years. And now I'm more, I would say, more in corporate environments, helping teams work more effectively together, but also just dealing with everyday people that, whether they struggle in social interactions or they want to improve their relationships, their community, a lot of this boils down to behavior. And there are these skill sets that some people have and some people don't. And our sort of ethos is being able to teach these nuanced skills that you don't really learn anywhere. You don't learn when you go to school. You're not taught how to mentalize or understand people's perspectives and how to navigate through that. You're not taught how to speak clearly or how to structure thoughts or structure your arguments. There's all these tools that are just not really available, and we're using AI and a bunch of technologies to help make that more available.
Very cool. Very cool. So, like I said, this is just really fascinating to me. And so for you personally, Blake, what people ask me all the time, Kevin, why do you do what you do? And what's the most exciting thing for you, Blake, about what gets you excited when you get up every day, about the work that you do? What's the big thing for you?
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoy the process of creation. Just the fact that we can make something I find it very cool. But I think the most rewarding from a client's perspective is some sort of direct, tangible outcome. So for example, I was teaching this class once in New York City. We used to teach a lot of live classes, and I would ask people, what's your name? What do you do? And why would you take a body language class? And I asked this one woman, and she says, you may have not remembered me, but I took your class 3 years ago. And I left your class and I was on the subway, and something you said really clicked with me. And there's this guy that was cute. So I talked to him, and he's my husband now.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, I love that. So it's these little shifts in perspective or these tools that can lead to true transformation in people's lives.
Yeah.
And we use video. Like I work with some people that just really have struggled. Like I don't understand why I can't form relationships. And then I show them video and it's like, oh, this is an easy problem and it's an easy solution. And then they're like, oh my God. And they actually are able to see that. I think that's quite rewarding. I think it's a skill set that's very unique to, and how we use data to do that at scale is pretty cool.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, that totally makes sense because you're right. It's the satisfaction that we get from somebody getting a result from just the hand that we had in that is
Right.
immensely gratifying.
Yeah, it
You know?
feels good. It feels
Yeah.
good. I mean, like there's different stages, right? There's like an insight where somebody's like, oh, okay, that's cool. Or, it's kind of like a like on a video you posted. But then there's the real things that make a difference in people. And I think it's always interesting as creators is like understanding the path towards creating more of that as opposed to anything else. Like that should be the KPI that you measure against success.
Absolutely. Totally. All right. Well, so now that we've got a little bit of context set, I'm going to switch gears and I'm going to reiterate the question for the benefit of the listeners. So have you ever been introduced to a person or persons that completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person or persons? And Blake, I'm just really excited to hear your story, your experience around this topic.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of different people. So there's so many people that contributed to my story. There are small 1-hour conversations that led to me thinking something differently. There's one person that was big in finance that I played in poker games with that definitely would not be comfortable me saying his name, but let's call him Andrew.
Okay.
That gave me a lot of wisdom when I needed it. So I'll tell you, he was the one person when I was younger, I was obsessed with getting like a JD MBA and going to mergers and acquisitions. And I really wanted to go to Harvard. And I was like building my whole thing to do that. And he said to me, he was like, you can go to Harvard or you can hire somebody from Harvard. And that just was like, oh, interesting. And he owns a very, very, very large financial company that's filled with PhDs. And he like just doesn't even have a PhD or anything. Like, and he was explaining to me I think he was one of the first people that I saw like, oh, wow, like when you're an entrepreneur, you can create whatever you want to create.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're not held down by these structural rules in a company.
Yeah.
And he helped. And over the years that this individual he just like dropped knowledge in profound ways. Like I remember I went to his house once and he had this beautiful wooden table. And I was like, and we have a very like frank relationship. I'm like, this table's nice. Like, how much is this table? And he laughed and he's like, what do you think? I was like, I don't know, like 15,000. And he was like, it was like $125,000 custom wood veneer table. So I said to him, listen, next time you want to buy a table like this, you talk to me and I'll get it to you for $50,000. And then like with a straight face, he said to me, he's like, that's why you'll never be able to afford a $125,000 table. And I was like, oh, and just like teaching me to focus and just like all these little sprinkles of wisdom. I was fast talking. I was very sure about the direction that I wanted to take things. And he was just very good at stating things in a way that made me listen.
Yeah.
And really grateful for that. And then just also like the people okay, so this is like a poker term. So in poker, you'll say like the people you came up with. And what that means is like, as you rose in stakes and rose in the game, you had like a certain set of friends that came up together. So you played poker when you were broke and now you have money and it's like, those stories. So like my friend, Nick Sonnenberg, who I've known for like 10 years, like we shared all those entrepreneurial journeys and paths together.
Okay.
Where times were rough. Like we remember like having conversations when like owing the IRS a ton of money and like all those those things that bind you and really connect you in a lot of ways. And then I mean, I also think what's so interesting is like the people in today's modern day society of like, I mean, I've everything I have, the majority of my business right now comes directly from relationships. What was weird about poker is that it was the opposite. People wouldn't share me because I was working with like the best players in the game, and I'd be working for one and I'd sign NDAs and they're like, listen, I don't want you can't work with another person in the game. Like, it was understood that I was everybody's like secret weapon. But in the business world, it's a completely different thing. Like, people are more open and more prone. I've gotten a lot of value out of masterminds. I've my friend Elliot Rowe has a mastermind that I love. He's a high level hypnotist that he does a mastermind twice a time in Utah. And my friend Nick Sonnenberg, who I was just telling you, has a mastermind in Idaho, actually going to one next week. He does one twice a year. I just really love those formats. Also, my other friend, John Levy. Do you know John?
I don't know John. No.
John Levy runs these influence dinners where it's just like it gets these really interesting, cool people together for these dinners where you don't know who the people are around you, and you all cook together and you make a meal together, and then you reveal like who you are. It's just interesting.
Nice.
I've always found the immense value out of being in a room filled with people that like just get along. That's why I like the groups where the person is like the guardian.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, like if Kevin invites them, they'll be good people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then you have a room full of good people, and then you're having those kind of conversations and those kind of shifts and balances. I just can't stress those enough. The value of that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I joined my first ever mastermind in 1997, when at the time I owned a carpet cleaning and restoration business.
You're in Joe's mastermind, right? You said
yes.
It was, yeah.
And there has not been a year that's gone by that I have not been in at least one or more masterminds. And in fact, there was a 3-year stretch where I invested over $200,000 a year to be in masterminds. Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm totally with you.
They're just so powerful, and just also it's like, it's hard to like keep up with, and you can maintain friendships in masterminds. Like, you see the same people year over year, and you grow and you develop and you advise one another. It's something quite special if they're run well. Yeah. I mean, I strongly agree.
So you've mentioned, one gentleman, which you referred to as Andrew, not his real name. You've mentioned Nick, you've mentioned John. Is there anybody else that you wanted to talk about?
Definitely. My friend Michael Margolis, he owns a company called Get Storied, and he does like really high level narrative work with like some of the biggest companies in the world. We've been friends for like over a decade now, and we do a lot on. We do like a standing weekly call.
Okay.
30 minutes each, where we just like talk business, talk life, talk this, and help one another out. I mean, those calls have been for both of us like just such fundamental shifts in how we operate and like different perspectives, and it's been absolutely incredible. Yeah. And then I guess the last relationship, probably the most impactful of them all, is my wife. Right? Like I don't think anyone compares to that. Just major directional shifts. And her name is Molly. She owns a company called Sleep is a Skill. And yeah, I mean, now that you're like, you said before, like, you don't realize, I think it's that quote, you are like your 5 closest friends or whatever. Like, when you really think about it, there's just so much truth in that, right? Like, the byproduct of your conversations, like, you're the creation of that average, and it means a lot of who you surround yourself with.
That's right. Well, you shared some of the things that, Andrew just, said to you almost in passing, almost as a just that,
Yep.
about, well, you can go there, or you can just hire somebody from there, or,
Yep.
and yep. And that's the reason why you will never have a table like this, because you think that way. And it's
Yeah.
like,
It's just the
ooh, man,
little,
that stung a little bit, but also
it felt good. Yeah. And
It's-
also like he was in 2008 in like the, really rough times for the financial sector. I went to his house to pick up money. He was from poker, right? And it was, I don't know, it was like 15K or something like that. So I go to his house thinking he's going to be stressed or whatever. I'll never forget it. It's like a large brownstone in New York. And I walk up and I see him in his kitchen and he's just like super relaxed. And I'm just like I said to him, like something around like, aren't you nervous? I said something where it's like, how are you not flipping out or something like that? And he just looked at me and he was like, I'm good. Like my family's good. We have enough money, whether I lost a job and he just seemed like the pillar of like financial security when I was like, you know, big swings in poker. And it was just something that I wanted to have, that calm, like that financial calm, and you just like, I want that, right? You see somebody and you're like, I want what they have, not necessarily the money, but the security and the
Yeah.
ease and the peace. And yeah, yeah, you do. And now I think also what's so cool is like you can learn. I mean, there's probably been like podcasts that people listen to and books that you read and stuff like that, that like in our really rich media driven society, there's so many different ways that you can influence your thoughts and your
Yeah.
feelings and your direction in life.
Yeah. Yeah. So, the one thing that I have, at least for me, and as many interviews as I've done on this podcast, a lot of my guests are like, yeah, Kev, I totally agree with that. That I've come to realize, at least for me, that the most valuable asset that we can possess as an entrepreneur is our relationships with the people in our lives. Everything else stems from that.
Mm-hmm.
And, as I've looked at the relationships I've had over my life and looked back on, like, you mentioned, we can talk about Joe Polish. Well,
Mm.
Joe Polish I met in 1997. That's 26 years ago. He was my introduction to, marketing, direct response marketing, any kind of marketing. I didn't know
Mm.
squat about marketing. And so he was my introduction to direct response marketing way back when. But if I look back now at all the things that have stemmed from that one relationship with Joe, and the
Mm.
fact that all these years later, him and I are still close friends. I've got his cell phone number. We message each other really regular and stuff, and for you, if you look at these relationships, you've talked about Andrew, Nick, John, Michael, and of course your wife. If you think about one thing that has transpired as a result of any one of these relationships, what is one thing that comes up for you is that, what, that is something really huge that came from that relationship that I know hands down, if I would have not ever met that person, that would have never happened.
Probably my friend Michael. So my
Okay.
friend Michael, me and him were walking down the street in New York City late at night once. I must have been like 25 at the time, or maybe 26. I don't know. It was a while back. And I was doing workshops in my office in New York City, live workshops in New York City. And he's like, I gotta go to the bank real quick. And we were talking about something financial and just like joking around. He was like, he flashed the check to me. And I was like, wait, you're making that for like a 2-day workshop? Like, are you serious? And I don't remember what the number was, but it was like a lot more money than I was making at that time.
Mhm.
And it got me thinking more about corporate training and corporate development. And so, and that was the catalyst for it. Like, definitely, like that moment was like, I was like, I need to start doing more of that. Like, I was like,
Uh-huh.
let's go.
Uh-huh.
And it was just like a little moment that shifted in the right direction. I mean, it was so interesting, right? Is like, you make a good point. It's like you have the moments and then you have the actions. And sometimes the moments occur, but the actions don't occur.
Sure.
So like, you're right. Like, and it's so true. It's so true that you remember the moments that are most correlated or connected to the actions.
Yeah.
So like when it happened and I think like one of the good things about having like the friendships and the circles is like having people that push you to action, right? And making sure that you actually do those things and actually go in the direction. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I just want to say, Blake, I really appreciate you taking the time to have this
Yeah,
conversation
of
because,
course.
like I
Thanks for
said,
having me.
from the first time we met, I was just really fascinated by what you do. And I got to imagine now at this point, anybody listening to this, there might be some people that are like thinking the same thing. Dang, Kev, I really like this Blake guy. I would like to find out more about the work that he does. This is fascinating. How can they find out more about the work that you're doing, or if you have any resources for them?
Yeah, definitely check out nonverbalgroup.com.
Okay.
Nonverbalgroup.com/newsletter is a newsletter of all the content I produce every week and the research that we're doing. It's just a good way to stay in touch with us. And by the time this podcast gets released, I should have a pretty decent sized YouTube channel, not size, decent, like size and not followers, but in the amount of content I publish. So it'll be youtube.com/nonverbalgroup.
Nice. Very cool. Well, Blake, once again, thanks so much for taking the time to have this
Yeah,
conversation.
it's
Any
great.
last thing you want to share before we call it a wrap?
No, just like you said, really life is I will share something personal. So like my father has ALS, which is a horrible disease in which you know, can't move your body, and it's what Stephen Hawking had, or it's called Lou Gehrig's also. And last week I was at a fundraiser in New York City for him. And the fundraiser was hosted by all the people that used to work with him.
Okay.
And it was really incredible to see like these people that he's known for 20 years of their life. They all came out to support him. And I had this moment where I was like kind of like dissociated from it and just watching everything. And I really thought to myself, like this is what life is. Like at the end of my dad's life, or like when he's going through something really hard, like he's not going to remember anything that's like you'd think you'd remember. You remember the relationships and the experiences that you have with people. And I feel like every day is an opportunity to start building more of that, because it's something that I don't know. I just feel like maybe it's just the perception, but it feels like there's less of that because of technology, because it's like so easy to connect with people. You can't really have those deeper connections because you could just have the surface thing. But I actually think technology makes connection easier. Like you have no excuse to not stay connected with people.
Yeah.
Specifically Instagram. Like when I meet somebody and I follow them on Instagram and they like show me their life a little bit, and then I see them again like 6 months from now, I'm like, oh yeah, I know everything that's going on. It's so good to connect with you. And you get to like, right? Don't you feel like that?
Totally.
So like,
Totally.
yeah, like use these social tools and use all of technology that's around us to amplify your impact in the world and amplify the connections that you make with others and the friendships that you have with other people.
Yeah. Yeah. Powerful stuff. Because, yeah, I mean, like I said, I am just such a firm believer that relationships are our most valuable asset. It's also just so dang rewarding,
Yeah.
And yeah, just well, Blake, once again, thanks so much for
Of
taking
course.
have this conversation. Really appreciate it.